here's your host, Sanderson Jones.
Hey! Lunchtime was had. Lunch seemed to... We're in that time. We're in that conference time, aren't we? It's post-lunch. Everyone's feeling a little like... Oh, also, you're Tom Power. That's amazing. I've just been seeing his name flash up on the Twitter thing quite often and thinking that Tom Power is just... I mean, you must have some relations with... Do you know anyone called Max Power? You do? Your son is called Max Power. Yeah, okay. If you're Max Power and Willpower, if that is the case, it is. I'm right here. So Max Power, well, you've heard all the power jokes, haven't you? That is the thing. Whenever you meet someone and they've got a name which is quite amusing, and you instantly think, I'm going to make the... And then you realize that they've heard it 10 times a day for their entire life. I don't know, do we have any French people in today? Give me a cheer. Oh, there. Hello. What's your name, madam? Melissa, enchanté de faire votre connaissance. This is a joke which only Melissa will find funny, maybe. But I went to France, and my friend Pip went to France. I don't know how many people, I think only I won't translate, but if you introduce yourself as your name is Peep, then again, there we go, there's a man who finds it funny. It's a very rude name, indeed. I feel quite bad bringing something up, but then not being able to explain it because it's a corporate environment. I feel I've messed up. I'm sorry. I have to say that I used to work in sales at The Economist, give me a cheer if you're in sales. Yeah, there's one. Okay, that's a guy in sales there. He's probably going to stand up and pitch or something like that. Sales is a very funny business. Basically, if you don't know what it is, if you're more one of those tinkerers than a sort of a salesperson, essentially in sales, you just, you meet someone, you ask them what they want, and then you tell them you can do it. It's really very simple, and you can, your product is always the answer. It's like, hello, I want, when I was selling advertising, it'd be like, I would, go to meet a client, and I would like to reach out to, I'd like to get my message across to big companies. I'd be like, oh, have you thought of advertising in The Economist? I'd like to get my message to small companies. Oh, have you thought about advertising in The Economist? I would like to get out of this well. Oh, have you thought about advertising in The Economist? It is really, it's a very fun thing. And then the one issue with sales is you've got to practice your career laugh. Was that one of them? That is, madam, what's your name? Sarah, what do you do, Sarah? You do a certain amount of business development. That was the laugh of someone who has sat across a table from a person and thought, well, I guess I just got to laugh now. That is the career laugh. So there's now going to be a panel. That's the next thing which is going to happen. There was no coffee after lunch, so we're just going to have to try to... What? One of the members of the panel is giving me the scariest look in the world. Yeah, okay, that was the no coffee. So I'm going to have to slightly be human caffeine here. So we just need to go shake off some of that lunch blues. Can people on this side of the room give me a cheer? And then on this side of the room. Oh, we can do better. And, oh, this is more like a playground event than anything which has ever been hosted here before, but I don't mind, I like it. So we are now going to have the data game-changing panel. So please, could you give a big round of applause for the people who are going to be on it? There is David from Import.io. There is Will from Daytonia. And there is Jackie from Flying Binary. Oh, there, sorry. I didn't see where you were. There we go. Do you guys all have the requisite amount of microphones? Oh, look, and this is what the presentation is going to be on. It's a talk on screensavers. Okay, no. So what we're going to have is, between the three, the talk is on big data. It's going to be just explaining some of, what it is, going to be looking at some of the opportunities which are available, and then also sort of practical applications of having enormous amounts of data points. So I think we're just going to get rolling, and it is Jackie is going to start talking us through. What are you going to talk about, Jackie? Yes, the microphone is the key there.
Hi everybody, delighted to be here today. I've got notes, mainly because he said 7 minutes, which is quite hard to cover big data in 7 minutes.
So you might have to hold the microphone. This? Oh yeah, because I suddenly realized that in fact I've got a microphone there. There we go. These people have got no microphone. I've got two.
Okay, I just put a few points up there. One of the things I want to address is G-Cloud, which I was the one that asked the question before. We founded this company on the back of change in the banking sector, delivered regulatory change across Europe in 5 months and wound everybody up from a banking point of view. And if in a tribe, wave of hands, are you still here? Good, I can say anything I like. I'm also appointed to the Cabinet Office, and I'm advising Her Majesty's Government on the next phase of the Open Data Agenda, which is the biggest big data from a UK point of view. So what do we do? So we use all of our big data platforms in public, private, and third sector. And basically, as a web scientist, what I'm here to say is there's money in data, there's money in the web, but you need to know where to start. And that's what we do at Flying Binary. We work out where to start and start to unlock the money for you. Context first. Possibly lots of people in this room are what we call part of the Google world. We're Google deployment specialists, so they don't mind us saying this, where you're engaged in SEO, using my website, social platforms, and so that's what you're busy doing with your tech. But these days, nobody needs to know why they use a website. When somebody says, why do we need to do this? Usually it's because that's the next level of disruption that's coming. So the next level of disruption. The thing about the... struggling all these devices, Jen.
Wondering, do you want to use this lectern to put your iPad on?
Good idea, thank you, Sanson. You're a star. So if you've been part of that Google world, what you said is, how relevant am I? Where am I in the rankings? No longer important, not from a web point of view. This is a new era. The money that's been being made now and the direction of travel you need to go in is the human connection. And Jonathan talked about that in the context of AR earlier. And how you deliver that business via the web depends on what cash you make. So what is it that's next? It's not that. It's about data. It's not necessarily about big data. We have 8 V's of big data, or data as we call it. But actually, I've met people who've got 3, 27. None of them matter. It matters more what you do with the data. So we have things that people talk about big data because they like to talk about big things, but volume's usually nothing to do with what you need to do. It might be to do how big are the pipes? Will that enable me to do what I need to do? That's something that's called viscosity. Is it about, can I keep track of the data I need? Velocity. Is it about, there's tons of different data out there. Variability. As I said, volume isn't usually what it's about. The thing it is about, though, is value always. So what we talk about that in that context is driving that value for you, developing a data ecosystem that means something to your business, your government, your charity. and blending together, forgive the web speak here, the heterogeneous data sources. What data is important to you? Bringing that together. Where is that in terms of value in your value chain? And then what does that mean? Now, this is the point where Sanderson's already glazed over, no idea what she's talking about. So I've anonymized a particular example to protect the innocent. This is what we do. We take all that lovely stuff, which if you're a web scientist you think is marvellous, and we do that with it. What is that? If you're a global mobile company, as this one was, the two big orange splodges are what you know about and what you've been spending millions on doing. And then you say, what impact has that? Well, actually, those millions didn't generate an awful lot. But without you doing anything, the other 38 dots really did. And that big red dot over there in South America is enough to send your sales team to do that stuff that Sanderson was talking about on a plane to Rio the next day. And that's what we do. We take that data source into that. And what does that mean for people? All the ladies in the room, diamonds, no, not really, or vicarages, or whatever it was, Maseratis. We shift a ton of dirt that surrounds that data. We do it in weeks and months, not months and years. We find the acre of diamonds, and then all you've got to do is mine it. And in our Web3 world, which is this resonance world I talked about, that's the key. So that's the large landscape picture. David is going to talk to you about this new Web3 world in a more focused way on a particular angle and exploring that data opportunity I've outlined in a grand scale that will mean something to your business. So over to David.
Hi there, I'm back again. I think I've got slides. I definitely got slides because Justin Bieber's in one of them. Oh, I thought that would have raised a bit more interest. I mean, come on. So hopefully my slides... there we go. Oh, it's a cat. There we go. Oh, that was a terrible preview. So hi there, my name is David White. I'm one of the founders and CEO of Import.io. And you've heard a little bit about us if you saw the panel earlier. So to sort of expand that, I'm going to talk in about 4 minutes about what we do. And if this clicker works, I will just wave it around until something happens. Oh, there we go. So we start with the premise, and Jackie talked about it, the websites are full of useful data. Now, obviously, there are a lot of websites out there. We, as humans, have created probably in the last 10 years one of the most incredible sources of knowledge ever. And we think some of that's data. And what we mean by data is stuff that you can put into rows and columns, principally. So our premise is websites are full of useful data. Clearly, some aren't. This is Perez Hilton's front page from yesterday. That's not useful data. It is a website, but it's certainly not useful, in my opinion. So, and I'm happy to debate that for another 4 minutes if anyone wants to argue with me. But, and the problem we have at the moment is, ignoring the fact that Justin Bieber's on the internet, is that web was designed for documents, not data. So typically, if you look at all of those websites out there, as a human, they're really easy to read. And that's good, because that's basically what the web's designed for. But if you're a machine, if you want to get it to a point where it's in rows and columns so you can process it, then actually it's not great. It's designed for humans, not machines. And the problem with that is you need one of these guys. Now, this is a developer-approved depiction of a developer. So this is not me saying this is what developers look like. This is my developers. I said to them, please give me a picture, a cartoon, that I can put in front of people, principally corporate people, that represent developers. So all of you guys, employers out there, who employ developers, this is what they think you think they are. So let's just deal with that. Now, the problem with developers is... well, there aren't many problems with developers. I actually love developers. The only problem I have with them is there are not many of them. So the situation we have at the moment is, if we say there's lots of data on the web, which is good, and the only way to get it is actually to get one of these guys to kind of make it useful, that's not good. So we think the current situation doesn't work. And the premise for us is the people that actually want to use the data don't have the skills to access the data. They have to go and spend time explaining to a developer, employing somebody to write a scraper or something similar, and then eventually they get the data they need, which can probably, if anybody's had experience of this, be 3 to 6 months later, in which case the data's long stopped being useful. This makes us sad. This is our standard sad cat. We have a minimum of 2 cats per presentation. It's a rule. We're based on the Silicon Roundabout, so we have to do this. It's part of the code. But it isn't a great situation. I think all of you have probably experienced that frustration of saying, if only I had the data usable, if only I could put it in a spreadsheet, then I might be able to get insight, find new things, have a better life, whatever, vicarage, fast car, whatever comes out of this stuff. So we kind of want to make it easier for you. We make it simple. And essentially what we do is we let you, as somebody that we can probably presume can use a website, otherwise you probably wouldn't have found the data in the first place, and probably use a mouse to get data into a usable format. Now that might just be to get it into a spreadsheet so you can order it or do something with it. It might be, if you're somebody that's maybe a bit more technical, to drop it into a database. You might also want to combine it with 300 other websites to have useful data. We enable you to do all that. So the kind of techie bit is no code, extract in minutes, use immediately, data in real time, and in return, for the person that gets the data pulled off their site, we give them visibility and insight into what's happening with that data. Second cat, happy cat. So this is a situation that says, if we can make it easier for you guys to get data, then the actual big data revolution and some of the opportunities that Jackie's talked about, etc., will happen. So our basic premise is find the data, extract it, use it. It's a very simple premise. We deal with the middle bit. You have to do the first bit and the end bit. Seems like a reasonable deal. The main thing we're about is democratizing access to data. And the kind of more serious point, we think if we're actually going to move into an economy, into a society that can benefit from some of the promises, and there are a lot of promises around big data, then the only way we're going to do that is by democratizing the access to it. And that's really about the fact that I think in order for us to really get the benefit of big data, you, every single one of you, first of all has to be data literate. I think one of the fundamental things we have to do in the education system is make people aware of what data is and be literate with it, including some of the things that we enter into data deals with companies all the time. Every time you use Google, you're entering into a data deal. You give them information, they give you a free search engine. Every time you use Facebook, you're entering into a very expansive data deal where they have a 14,000-word terms and conditions that you enter in about how they're going to use your data. So that's the first thing. Second thing, you have to get your hands dirty. If you're going to really become data literate, you have to actually pull data off the web and start doing something with it. Start having those questions and get them answered through this access to data. So that's what we're about, and you can try it there. So over to Will now, who's going to talk about doing more practical stuff.
Thanks, David. Thank you. Practical examples of data. I can talk for hours on this subject, so Sanderson, you need to give me the 7-minute red light flashing warning, just in case I go overboard. The best way I can think of telling you about practical examples of using data in your business is to tell you the story of my company and then weave in some anecdotal examples. A couple of years ago, my company was in the business of building mobile applications, and almost every company that we went to wanted to update their mobile application with some sort of data refresh. And without fail, every single one of those companies had no real mechanism for updating the data in those mobile apps. And we saw this as being a bit of a problem. After about the 5th or 6th time, we sat down and we thought there must be a way that we can help businesses of any size open data up and not just connect it to mobile applications, but connect it to anything that they want to. But we need to make this really, really simple if we're not going to be involved, if they're not always going to be calling us and asking us for technical support. So what we came up with was a product called Datonia. And Datonia, in its simplest form, is an Excel sheet sitting inside Dropbox that's connected to a database in the cloud. And then we have a piece of synchronization technology that in real time will synchronize the contents of that Excel sheet with the database in the cloud. And then we expose that database through an application programming interface, technical term. But the upshot of that means is that we can connect the data held inside of that spreadsheet to any application or any business or anything that the owner of that data wants. So that was pretty cool, and we applied it to some of our projects. And some of my clients right now are using it as a sort of multi-platform mobile application content management system. But we also gave it to another one of our clients, and they came back about a month later, and they said, "This is great. Can we have 15 more copies of it?" And we sort of scratched our heads at that point and said, why does anyone want 15 copies of this product? We designed it sort of one hit, one company. And what they were actually doing was they were giving it to their customers. And after a conversation and a bit of analysis, we realized that they were solving certain types of problems inside their organization with this technology. Principally, they were lowering the costs of acquiring data from their customer organizations. They had created an Excel template that met their needs, handed it to their customers, asked them to put it in their Dropbox account, and then using our technology, they were in real time reading the contents of those spreadsheets into their line of business applications. Previously, they'd hired a couple of people to sit there and to receive emails with spreadsheets attached to them, or bits and pieces of email or information in other forms, and they were hiring people to transfer that information into another system. And what they'd done is they'd streamlined that process. So we thought that was kind of interesting. So we'd got this general tool which was helping to, on the one hand, open data and allow it to be connected wherever the owner of that data may want it to be. But we also saw it being used to aggregate or collect data. And that data was coming through to the central organization in a cleaner, structured, faster way. We got very excited about that because in some ways that's disrupting web-based browser technology. You know, my client in that particular instance hadn't gone to the trouble of creating a web portal and opening up a software project and going through months of software development at their cost to build a portal that their customers may or may not want to use. They'd really streamlined and simplified the whole thing. When we saw that, we got very excited, and it sort of opened a door for a lot of further potential growth. You know, we saw applications for this with franchise businesses. A way of transferring information from an orbital franchise business back to HQ, maybe sales information, maybe marketing information, promotion information. And then we looked a little bit further up the line and we saw applications for this in government, central government. You know, so many public bodies that actually want to get different types of data from individuals or small business, the Office of National Statistics, for example, or the Department for Education, giving it to schools and asking schools to fill out spreadsheets, which probably they already are doing, but just having a real-time view on that information aggregated back into the cloud. Suddenly we saw a sort of a vision of data being liberated and no longer held in silos, but being connected and therefore useful and exchanged in real time. When we saw that happening, we wrote up a research and development grant application to the Technology Strategy Board, and we were fortunate enough to win that grant. And so right now we've just embarked on a fresh set of research and development initiative to further this technology and this application to help small businesses open data, use data, collect data in a streamlined, faster way so that they can exploit it for their everyday business needs, be that to cut costs or to grow revenue streams. Okay.
No, we've already ascertained that I have a microphone.
Okay.
There, and then, in fact, if I'm going to grab this one, considering it's like a microphone relay race, isn't it? And then this is for any. So now we're going to have a panel discussion, and if there are any questions from the audience on this, there we go, the man in the bow tie. You give it up for the guy in the bow tie. There, look, very dramatic. I'm going to move it a bit closer. So there are. What we've got is we've got some questions here. And then if there are any other questions that any of you guys want to answer as and when it happens, then just put your hands up. Also, I just have to quickly say that when Jackie showed that picture of data saying I've glazed over, I am literally the only comedian in, I think maybe the world, who has used the phrase data-driven comedy. Because that's the sort of thing which really gets me off, you know. The thought that you could go and have an app to be able to tell people, you know, make jokes about the audience is so exciting. But the question which, you know, I want to ask you, that what do you see are the biggest benefits of, you know, we're going to use this phrase big data here because it's what the people understand. Yeah, what for you are the big benefits that you see from it?
Well, I think we've collected data.
Oh, hold on, I think you have to use that microphone. There we go.
We've collected data to run our societies, to run our governments, to run our businesses. And when you start to pull that together, you can answer some fundamental questions. So we have a group of data scientists working with the foremost cancer specialists in the world, where they've brought together 1 million pieces of research. And that likely is going to drive the next phase of response to cancer as a disease. And not surprisingly, the pharmaceutical companies are really interested in that and are funding that research. So it's very much what we as a society want a question answering. You as a business want a question answering. I don't think there's any question that data can't answer, because if we don't have the data, we can go get the data. You know, in the way that these guys have explained, there's a way of collecting it, but we already have huge data resources and huge questions to answer. So I think it's very much matching what's the foremost questions we've got to answer, get the data to solve that question.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I'll take that one. I mean, I would say that, you know, and it's often said about big data, I think the opportunities are almost limitless. That doesn't mean they're easy to access, but it does mean they're out there. McKinsey wrote a report, I think, last year that probably outlined at a high level why everybody in business and certainly everybody in government should pay attention to big data. I think one of the stats that it was something like 300 billion could be saved out of the US healthcare budget if it was if they really took the opportunities of the data they have inside their environment to do things like personalised medication, etc. So I think the opportunities are there. I think from a business point of view, the reality is if you're not using big data today, one of your competitors will be, and they will have a market advantage on you. And that is maybe not immediately apparent today, but in 5 years' time, it would be very unusual for a business not to be taking advantage of the data they had available to them.
Is this on? Oh, it is. I think it's cause and effect. I think that's what big data gives for businesses. The examples of big data that I've come across have been where the effect is measured by extracting big data from social networks to see what is happening in the market, or see what people think or react or sentiment, and then that's combined with internal data, which is the cause, like a marketing activity, or my background is music industry, so an artist going on television or issuing a new album or a marketing campaign, and then overlaying that sort of big data gathered from social networks against internal events and seeing where they coincide. So if something has taken place, and then looking and seeing what the reaction has been, and that gives you an insight. That gives you an understanding about what your business is doing and how it's interacting with the wider world, and it's that insight that I think is a big advantage of big data.
So, do you think that big data sort of replaces market research?
I think it augments it, adds to it. It's I've never met a marketeer that sort of doesn't examine every possible shred of evidence that they can get about what's happening inside the market. So I think it's a very valuable source.
I would say it will replace it. So certain sectors are already replacing it. They're already challenging traditional market research. It rather depends where you are, not only in the sector, but in that sort of supply chain. We've done some prototype big data platforms over the last year where market leaders have said, it's the 360-degree insight, which is what Will's just talking about, first, and then if market research has got anything to add. But that's still early adopters, those people that have A, got the cash, and B, got the know-how to know that this is a fundamental change. But I think that will definitely flip. In the next 4 years, we bring another 5 billion people onto the World Wide Web. and certainly before then it will have flipped, and we could all take bets as to when that will be, but within the next 2 years that change is going to happen. So it's already challenging now, but it's on its way.
I think, whether it replaces or not, I think it will certainly augment it. I think what you'll see is market researchers will use big data techniques to probably achieve a similar outcome.
Also, are there any questions which anyone else has from the things which have been said so far? We don't want to keep rattling on, and then there's people with things that they desperately want to ask questions about. You might be saving them for the end. Big thinkers. This is very much the after lunch thing, digesting both the big data and also the delicious panna cotta. I really couldn't resist. I had 3. I don't know. It's when my metabolism slows down, these trousers will not fit. The one thing is that from this whole thing of having big data, in my own experience, I know that when people find out that I do a comedy show which involves me researching the people that are coming, befriending them on Facebook, looking at their Twitter feeds and their LinkedIn, I know that it terrifies them. But how can we be sure that getting all this data, and I'm sure there's quite a few people here probably thinking it sounds a bit scary, how can we be sure that this big data is used appropriately?
Sure, that's not you rather than the process. I'll leave that open. I think the reality is, and I talked about this briefly, I think people need to be aware of data and the data they create and what people do with that data. And the reality is, if you look at some of the richest people in the world, they've got very rich because they've used your data to create wonderful businesses. That's not a bad thing. What they've done is provide very useful services off the back of that. But I think you do need to be aware of it. You need to be aware of when you publish a picture on Facebook, they own the rights to it. That's not a good or a bad thing. It is something you should be aware of as a user of that service. So, I think we're probably doing a talk next month on, around this of the question, is privacy dead in a big data world? And maybe it is the way we see it today. I certainly think you as the owner of that data need to be proactive, much like you lock your door at the moment, you probably need to do the same for your data if you don't want it out there.
I think my view as a web scientist is slightly different in the sense that there are, exactly what David said, but there are defaults going on here. So your pathways through the web are being set by these companies. And privacy settings is one of those ways in which a company will launch a change to its privacy settings and set some defaults. And sometimes they're very complicated. And so unsetting those or resetting those from a user point of view is quite difficult. And there'll be a growing education process we'll need to do as web scientists to teach people what is being done with their data. I think the other element of that is, so Tim Berners-Lee's not in this room, but if he was, what he would say was, the web's neutral. People will do good things with it and bad things with it, but you as a user need to understand what's being done with your data. We have a project, I'm appointed to Cabinet Office, as I said earlier, we have a project in government which is pseudo-research, where we're saying, we've said to those people that collect our data, give it back. And we call it the My Data Project. And what we've done is brought that onto a big data platform, and we're exploring, if somebody's going to own me on the web, shouldn't it be me? If somebody's going to monetize me on the web, shouldn't I give permission or own that money? And then finally, I'll say on this whole privacy deal, again, from a web science point of view, our offline laws cannot be applied online. We have a gap from a legal point of view. I have a policy forum running in September. If there's any, what I would call agile lawyers in the room, if you're a lawyer and you don't like the term agile, you're not one. But if there are any agile lawyers in the room, please come see me. We're getting round tables to look at the gap between offline and online, because we can't leave this issue in the hands of the users because it's too complicated. and the education will take some time. But there are real issues around this, and we shouldn't allow the companies that are utilising this to determine the route through. From us as web users, we should determine that. But in our current system, our current legal system, that's not possible.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in privacy, but I can comment on it from a human being point of view, a customer point of view, as it were. And I find it, I agree with everything that Jackie said. I find it, complex, difficult to understand. Every now and then I see a photo or a family photo pop up of mine in some social network that, I didn't know I even joined. That, it does happen. Google Plus is an example where I seem to have joined it, and I'm not sure how I did, even though I have my, I run my business through Google applications. Other examples are when I upgrade my smartphone, and it comes preloaded with a bunch of default settings. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, well you can improve your smartphone's battery life if you switch off the following things." And he gave me a complex list of instructions, where to go in order to switch them off. And when I was looking at what I was switching off, it was sort of geospatial ad tracking. I was like, what's that? And why does it improve my battery life anyway? And so I definitely turned it off, and I have no understanding whatsoever of what the implications are of turning it on and off. I just know that when I got the phone, it was automatically on default on, along with a bunch of other stuff. So I do agree with Jackie in that consumers need to own that, but I also think that there's room in there for other things like trade associations and government bodies to protect consumers. Telephone networks as well. There's a bunch of organisations out there that have a responsibility, I think, to protect my data, and I think it's a very grey and volatile, moving area, and I hope it's going to get cleaned up fairly soon.
So there's a lady who has a question, which means that Mr. Bowtie, look, the one time he's got to get a microphone to someone. Spend a little less time bowing to the audience.
Hi, I just thought I'd ought to comment because I'm a privacy lawyer, and I totally agree with you. I mean, I was trying to change my own Facebook privacy settings, and I find it impossible. And the social media social network service providers are really the gateway to enabling individuals to manage their privacy, and we're placing a lot of responsibility in the hands of organizations that basically have a conflict of interest in dealing with privacy properly. So I do think that there is a big role for more encouraging more industry cooperation and regulation in this area. The laws are going to change on this, but I'm not sure that they're necessarily going to change in the right way, and that's the problem. Because all of this, as Jackie, I mean, it's currently being debated. There are going to be new EU laws on data protection coming in over the next couple of years. You'll see in the press people are talking about the right to be forgotten, which is going to be created by the new EU regulation in the next couple of years. And I think consumers will probably be thinking, oh, that'll sort me out. I'll be able to delete whatever I put on the internet. Not necessarily true. It's not going to work just quite like that. So I think we do, as individuals, have a responsibility to be a bit more aware of how we exercise our privacy rights. But I also wanted to say, I think as businesses, there is a risk in the more data your employees create about other employees, the more data that your business is holding, which is personal data, all of this is regulated. So the increase in data clearly has got huge opportunities, but also has risks that have got to be managed. And I think, one of the things that businesses probably would sensibly do is to sort of think about how much data creation is really necessary, because if you're sending emails through the network about employees or other people or customers, then all of this potentially is disclosable. So yeah, it's part of balancing the benefit and the risk of data.
Thank you very much. Was there a particular question there? No, okay, I just wanted to, but it is, thank you very much.
Just for me, I was just wondering, what would your So given that you sit in this space, given that you've expertise in this space and you're not just, you have a consumer role as well, so you sort of see both sides, what would you see that we would need to do as first step?
I think we just need to be aware, it's be aware of when you are creating, a tweet or uploading a photo or sending an email. This is all data that is going to be stored in ways that are not going to be within your control. So I think as a starting point, that's probably, the awareness should be the starting point, in my view.
The one bit of feedback I could have, which might be useful on this, is that having done a show where I do research people online, I can tell you that 18 and 20-year-olds have totally different ideas of what is good to share and what isn't. It is, privacy as we know it is thought of very differently. David, do you have something to add?
I think I do this test, and I can see at least 2 people in the audience have had it. Why is Google free? Why is Facebook free? Why is Twitter free? I think Google, it costs about 1.2 billion a year to run their data centers. That's a lot of money. And I think if you start to think about that and you start to think about why these services are free, you start to realize it's a deal. And in some cases, it's a good deal. I get a lot out of some of these services. I think it's a good deal. But you have to have that in your mind. You have to be aware of the fact it's a deal you're getting into. Again, the test on the 18 to 24s or whatever is to say, you're happy to share your data with your friend. Are you happy to share it with a foreign government that might arrest you when you arrive in their country because they've read your Twitter feed and you say bad things about them? And this is, again, it's just about that awareness to say, if you put something out on the web, it's out there. And even with, right to be forgotten, etc., the reality is it's out there. So you just need to be aware of that. That's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just a fact that you have to think through as a consumer. It's a bit like crossing the road. Look both ways.
On just the subject of being, I think anytime you ask the question, would you like to be arrested by a foreign government? The answer is normally no.
Yes.
Yeah, unless someone has a very specific interest. But on just something a bit, I don't know if anyone saw the story where in Iran they're trying to build an Islamic version of Google Earth because they think I don't know what that would be, sort of essentially, but the most amazing thing about that is the guy who is running the project has got a PhD from Kim Jong-il University, and his PhD is in the amazing subject of country management. I tried to research this to find out more, but obviously there's not
data.
Yeah, there's not enough data there. But I just love, if anyone does want to find out more about what is involved in the PhD of country management, please find out. But this, I feel quite bad to go from the risks of data and the areas of privacy, and you were saying there's a lot of data out there which you might not know about. Now, if you were a business, what is the data which is out there which you see an amazing amount of opportunities coming out from? Where are other examples of, sort of ways you can take this data and sort of use it well?
I think, there are some amazing data sources out there. For me, the ones I get most excited about kind of right now are the push for governments to publish data. I think there's some, if you look at a government, the amount of touch points they have to society are incredible. The amount of data that's generated from all those touch points, whether it's, running a police force, providing roads, core infrastructure, etc. The fact that the UK government have a policy of publishing this, I think that's an amazing resource. I think it's an amazing resource for businesses. There's a lot of insight you can get into key decisions such as where do I base my company, where do I open shops, where do I focus my target markets. But there's also some amazing data for individuals. I'm currently, one of my pet projects that I work on is around data on MPs. It's my particular focus point at the moment because it's fascinating. There's so much data published about that data that MPs have to now make open. And this is a fascinating data source. These are really interesting people. I'm particularly interested on how their lobbying and their funding works, because that's as a citizen, I'm always really interested to understand why one MP might be in favour of something and one against. And I would say, in all credit to the UK government, that data's all out there, and it's maybe not as usable as it could be, but it is out there, and that's a very exciting data source.
Really, to pick up on what David said, I mean, obviously, what we've tried to do in Cabinet Office is do that, but we're pushing that agenda forward very aggressively for two reasons. Number one, good ideas come from everywhere, and what we collect in government as data to run our services that's the purpose of it. But actually, it can be secondary use to do some great things. Things like the ICT programme and moving London to a smarter city, making it more competitive in the global market. And if anybody thinks they need government data and it's currently locked down, either see me or go to data.gov.uk. We've got a new form up there, request it, we'll unlock it, we'll send it out there. Secondly, we have 58 countries around the world now collaborating on data as part of something called the Open Government Partnership. We've already had amazing results from some of that data that is being triangulated to say, what do we know where we can solve problems? Things like in Tanzania, there's an SMS system, if anybody knows how Africa works. It primarily works on non-smartphone systems. And there's an SMS system where when the wells run dry and the water is not getting to a region, there is an SMS code you can type in, and the government will send engineers, literally like a SWAT team, out to turn the water on. And that's all been facilitated by government data being released, and then the communities actually understanding how to do that, through to our own experiments with that in the UK, where we have released post-operative heart care data out to the wider world. That allowed patients to compare which trusts get you not just through heart surgery, but keep you alive after. And that what happened there was patients voted with their feet, and they went to the trust where they had a better chance of survival for longer. And our post-operative heart care now is up by, in terms of survival rates, up by 50%. And so for me, from a passion point of view, it's what can we release out there from a data point of view? How can we collaborate across the world with that data? And what can we do to make a difference to individual citizens or communities or groups? And so that's the reason I'm part of the initiative in Cabinet Office, because I think there's a huge amount of things we can do with it. It's what are the questions, and if there's data locked down and you're one of those people that can do something with it, then let us know and we'll release it.
I'm going to answer a slightly different question.
Go for it, renegade.
It will be related. If you could ask a business, what data would they want to collect? And what I mean by that, I guess, is that I think that as data in business becomes more, businesses become more and more aware of the value of data, data becomes a negotiable point in the contract relationships between businesses. And that, if a business has an opportunity to, it can request data from its suppliers or from its customers, and therefore, take that data on board, as well as on top of the original transaction of whatever it is, and add that to its big data pool and its trending and its insights, so that you can actually request from your customers, say, information about what they're doing with your product or what's happening out there, and then fold that in to get a greater insight into the value of what you're doing, and that might have an impact on your business. So in a sense, that's not open data, that's getting data and bringing it on board at that point where you strike a commercial transaction between another business.
And that's the classic negotiating thing of asking something of low value to them but high value to you.
But potentially, yes. You'd never be quite sure what the value is or why they want it, but that might give them some sort of insight that might be beneficial to both parties. It's not necessarily negative.
And there's, by the way, does anyone here, there's probably some people who are working on great data projects. Are there anyone here who's working on interesting data-related things? Again, if you just want to keep it to yourself, that's good too, class. There we go. There's a man there, Alex. Oh, there's the man there who would like a microphone there. Just, there's probably a lot of info in the room.
Sunderland Software City are currently working with the Tyne and Wear Integrated Transport Authority on opening up their data platforms at the minute, which is actually quite exciting because they're doing it quite purely from a selfless perspective. They just want a better experience for their users on the metro and the roads and everything else. One of the biggest challenges we found, though, is putting the infrastructure in place that's going to do that without having a detriment to the existing platform that they use. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but UTMC, which is the urban traffic management. But yeah, it's quite exciting, and from our perspective, we're just hoping that we can create an opportunity for local software companies to actually benefit from that. But yeah, it wasn't a question as such. Just
No, that's exactly what we wanted to. There we go. It can even, well, so far we've heard that it can cure cancer, make people survive heart disease. It's got 300 billion. But most importantly, the people of Newcastle will have a better train ride, which is good. But then there's an issue there. You've gone from something where, it's all very well and good talking about this at a high level. In my side, a now full-time startup of running a godless congregation. And being 100% serious here, guys, is that one of the things you want to do is work out how, does it have an impact on people? Like, does it actually, if you go along to something and you sing songs with other people, oh, hello, someone's just updating their iTunes. There we go. And probably with a whole load of new terms and conditions, which you will agree to without reading. But then, let's say you want to get started on a big data project. I mean, how do you go about doing it? What are the skills that you need?
Take it first. I mean, one of my concerns about the what we're calling the big data revolution, seems remarkably similar to the data revolution, but there we go. At least it's got big in front of it. Is I think the skills are an issue. They're already an issue insofar as suddenly guys that I used to employ that were called BI guys, business insights, business intelligence guys, who were kind of easy to find and not very popular, are now called data scientists. And these guys are rock stars, and we have to pay them like rock stars. So on the one hand, I think that's great marketing on their point. That's well done. But the reality is suddenly we're into a skills shortage. People that were used to be 10 a penny are now considering more than that. And we have to cope with that as a business and accept the additional cost of a data scientist. So I'm very keen that we try and de-skill this as much as possible. And what I mean by that is there will always be a place for data scientists, because at some point in the process you might need them. But we should try and make as much of that kind of big data journey, that kind of getting your hands dirty with the data, as close to the people that are actually going to do the processing, as close to that, what we call analyst, the person that's actually sitting there going, I wonder if I did this, would that happen, should be the person to get the data. And I think if we don't do that, we are going to end up not fulfilling the promise of this big data, because the skills will become the choke point.
I think from my point of view, if you have a company that's got 300,000 employees like we did last year, and their CTO gets the vision and he wants to translate that into bottom line value, first of all, he's going to go past the CFO, so we help him do that. But equally, what I say to anybody is some of the skills are intuitive and you can train to it. And some of the skills, like the ones that David's outlined there, are always going to be specialists. So what we've done is put a program together to work out how we raid your company's skills to create that large group of people you're going to need that you already have, and retrain them into this new world. One of those people christened it the Zero to Hero program, which is quite a good name. And then we specialise in training data scientists, so we have a program to do that, and we go into companies. We're going into one next month, and we literally start their data science training program, and out of that will be 22 data scientists. But for every 3 data scientists you've got, we generally find there's about 50 that don't need those skills. So whilst I agree with David, generally you still have to go and find that pool of people and a mechanism to do it. But from your point of view, Sanderson, in order to understand what it is you're even doing, you need the evidence of what impact that has. As a web scientist, I would say that. So, I mean, the web grows organically. We don't control it. It just is what it is, fabric of permanence, as we've said. But I would say in order to understand what it is you're even doing, you need to actually understand it in context, and that to me is evidence it with data. And you can start very, very small in terms of cost and time and skill. And then depending on what you find, obviously you can scale it up to however many. Make it global. I mean, I don't know whether you're thinking of taking over the world, but you know, it's possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the ambition.
When you apply that question to a medium-sized business or a small business, you get a different kind of answer, because these kind of companies can't afford to hire the data scientists or the BI guys, or even host or buy in the internal infrastructure themselves to host big data projects, and they have to look outside. And I think they have to look to a whole raft of startups that have emerged in the last 12 to 18 months specifically to address this, which is collecting data, putting a dashboard on top of it, allowing you to mine that data, pivot that data, whether or not you have classic data analysis skills. You know, some of them out there are saying, you know, we're the death of data scientists, because you don't need a data scientist in order to operate this dashboard and work out what's happening. So I think for smaller businesses, you know, who want to work with big data, they have to look outside to startups.
I can't wait until the data scientist from Google comes and talks later. Turns out his job isn't so impressive after all. And so then, I mean, at the moment, do you think there are? I mean, are there some examples of small to medium companies which are doing good things with data, and then maybe, do you think are large corporates doing the things that they can with it?
Not prepared for this question, haven't checked my facts, but I operate in the music industry, so there's a couple of organizations out there, one called the Next Big Sound, and that's trying to help the music industry understand what the next big act is, through big data techniques. Music Metric, based down in Silicon Roundabout as well, seems to be operating similar. So, in those cases, they're BuzzDeck, another one from the music industry. The larger, they can provide services to smaller labels and sometimes big labels as well. But those bigger labels, the major record labels, they have got the capability and the firepower to support their own big data initiatives. So it's kind of like a classic example right there.
I think from my point of view, you'd be surprised how difficult it is for the global companies to get on this agenda, and how hard it is for them to even make a start. But we've had a number of SMEs, and I'm a Tech City mentor, so a number of our Tech City companies where they're focusing on a particular niche. And how does big data help me do that? Somebody like yourself, Sanderson. So how do I then get that picture, understand what I then did, see if I should do something else? But the way they've tackled that, which I think is very interesting, is they've said, I'm going to target a sector, a particular group, or the agency market or something, and they've started there. And then, depending on the success of that, they've pivoted or expanded on that. So I think it's an exploration process that needs to be done. And if you're a one-person startup, I'm thinking of one in particular in Tech City, you can become a 15-person startup just by taking that exploration route.
I'll deal with the large corporate side because it's the majority of our experience. I think large corporates, so I was chatting to somebody at Gartner last week who said, I think the number one issue for the second year running of their survey of CIOs is data. So I think pretty much every large corporate is aware of big data, is certainly talking about big data, probably at a board level to one degree or another, and probably has ambitions. I think some are further forward with their ambitions than others. I think some industries it's more of a natural fit. So my background is financial services. I think there is a natural fit in data crunching within the finance industry. And as such, you are seeing increasingly, maybe some data projects being renamed big data projects, which is one problem. And I did have an interesting event last year where I sat down with a bunch of CIO from large banks and said at the start, how many of you are doing big data projects? And they'll put their hand up. And then I explained what big data was and asked the same question at the end, and one guy put his hand up. So maybe there's a lack of awareness of what big data actually means. But I think you can see the ones that are starting to make the most of it. And I think retail have done some really interesting stuff. The one that often gets talked about is Target, but I think lots of retailers are doing interesting stuff. I think there are industries that are...
With Target, do you want to say what they're doing?
Target had a very famous and well-reported approach or technique in big data. What they found was that the point at which shoppers were most likely to move from one large retailer to another is when they had life-changing events. Life-changing events include moving house. The one that was probably the most had the most financial impact to your retail spending patterns was having a child. So they then looked at the indicators for female users of Target, buyers at Target who were using their loyalty card to see what was the run-up to the point at which they started to buy nappies. Obviously, buying nappies being an indicator you have a child, mostly. And they then mapped out a set of buying behaviours that meant they could predict that if a woman bought cotton wool buds, coconut lotion, and about 4 or 5 other products, they were most likely to be in their second trimester. So with that knowledge, they then started a targeted campaign to those users, those loyalty card holders, to offer them vouchers on discounts, etc. The reason why this came to press attention is they sent these vouchers to a 16-year-old girl in Arkansas who stormed into the local Target and ranted at the manager that there was no way his daughter was pregnant and this was ridiculous. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, he popped back in to apologise.
Well, that is amazing and not at all scary. I just have to, this is maybe a more specific question for David. David, how is it just popped over the pond and you won the Best Startup Award at Strata. How did that feel to go and be over there and take a prize like that in the Valley?
Well, I know Prue will like this. Going over, we were fortunate enough to be invited over to one of there's 2 major big data conferences. One is Strata in Santa Clara. We were in a startup competition, I think 14 other American startups, most of which, in fact, I think all of which were based in the Valley, and we beat them. It felt great, actually. I think we had Andrew here, who's one of the co-founders, was asked, whereabouts in the Valley are you based? And he said London, which took about 2 minutes to explain that wasn't in the Valley, and actually it was in a small country called the United Kingdom. I think it's one of the things that, as London-based startups, just a little rant from me here, I think we need to make more of the fact that, we are competing at a global level. I see lots of London-based startups that just happen to be based in London. That doesn't mean they're not companies that could compete in Silicon Valley. So yeah, it was great. We loved it.
That is good. And so from a nice question to you scrape data from people's sites without asking them. What do they feel about that? Is that practice ethical?
We do scrape,
Sorry,
for want of a better word. Yeah,
nice question.
Yeah.
Then you go for the jugular.
That was a warm-up, wasn't it? Let's face it. It's an interesting, it's a topic that I think many practitioners in big data face, the fact that, lots of data is published on the web. You can pull that data off the web without seeking permission. Technically, you can just pull it. It's pretty straightforward. I think about 155 petabytes of data a day are either scraped or crawled. For those of you that don't sort of spend a lot of time hanging around petabytes of data, that's a lot. It's a pretty huge amount. Is it ethical? I think it really depends. It comes back down to the fact it's a deal. So the typical process of pulling data off the web is you pull it off and you run away, basically. You're just an IP address that's pulling data out of that site. We believe that it should be a deal. So what we offer to the people that we're pulling data from is we offer them insight. We provide them with something that's similar to Google Analytics, but for scraper traffic rather than for human traffic. So yeah, I think it's an interesting area. Again, it forms, law-wise, it's a very grey area. And I think there's been a number of test cases both ways, and it seems there still is not a conclusion. The general opinion we get from data owners is they really like the fact that we drive traffic to them, because that's why they have a website. But it's got to be a deal, I think, and it's one of the most important things around big data. You always have to think of both sides of the equation. So, the data owners are a key part of our story and a key part of our approach to the market.
There was a question in the audience for...
Scraping always brings questions.
Look at that. That arm went up very quickly. There's... Oh, is it working?
Nope. Yep. Okay, good. Hi, my name is Anka. And I think that people should try, like you guys that are into data, you should try to change the perspective that users have about sharing their data, because I think that now everybody's afraid, like, oh, I don't want people to know what I'm doing. I don't know websites to take my data. Like, if you put it out there, why do they take it and use it? I think it's normal for you to use it, and I think that we just have to find a way to have people be more open about sharing their data. Do you agree with that or no?
I think it's about transparency. I think you have to know, I'm quite willing to share my data if I know, first of all, that I'm sharing it. Because sometimes in my activities on the web, I might be sharing data I'm unaware of, and that is a problem. I think if I'm aware of the fact I'm sharing data and I know what it's going to be used for, then I can work it out. I can say, you know what, it doesn't, I don't really value that website. I won't go on it. I won't share my data. Or I can decide that, you know what, it's a great deal. I give them a little bit of data. They give me a service that I really value. And in which case, I'm happy to get involved. I think the problem at the moment is not that I think there is a bit of scaremongering. I think it's more of the fact that both parties have to, be more informed on the deal. I think it's the incumbents particularly have to be more open about what they're doing with your data. I think if they're not, they will be legislated into it. And we're already seeing this. I mean, Google have spent a lot of time with the EU recently talking about their practices. I think Facebook have come under a lot of pressure initially from the US government, but I think that continues in Europe as well. But it is, we've got to know what we're getting into, because I think at the moment a lot of people are unaware of the fact that they are giving these companies huge amounts of data. I think if they were aware of it, they would make probably the same decision by and large, but at least they would do it with information rather than without.
Okay, thank you. I think from, the way that I see it is, the moment that you say something in real life, somebody hears it and uses it, why is that different than sharing your data? The moment that you put it out there, it's out there, you did it, and just be more transparent about your life, and then other companies can improve products. And am I just seeing it wrong?
Can I just find out, do you work for a company which does interesting things with data?
Somewhat.
No.
Just to pick up.
No, it's a new program that we'll be doing, and we'll be researching the way that entrepreneurship works. So we'll be doing research on entrepreneurship using the data that we have from our event attendees. But that's not something that they don't agree or they don't know that we have.
Yeah.
But your point around, when you say something in real life, then people can do what they want with it. I mean, the reality is we have very strict laws around libel, etc., which protect people in real life when they have conversations, when they put stuff out there, that seem to be a little bit ignored quite often on the online world. So I think there is a sense of, and we talked about it earlier, the current legislation around privacy was not designed for the world we live in today. And it has to be updated somewhat, because I think, part of the problem is there is an ignorance of what happens. We've seen cases in the UK press last week and the week before around somebody being questioned over tweets they did 2 years ago when they were 15, and now they're 17, they've applied for a job, and it happens to be a government job, or I think local council job in effect. Now, they were probably unaware as a 15-year-old that being on Twitter and probably putting some ill-advised comments on Twitter was going to come back to bite them when they enter the job market. That's a lack of awareness, and that is a problem. I mean, you don't want to be in a situation where, as a 15-year-old, you're not aware of what happens when you tweet about taking drugs.
Yeah, but in the end, it's all about being responsible for what you do and what you say, right?
Yeah, I think that's the case, but also I think we can all be very relieved that we are not teenagers with loads of digital photos being taken. That would be hellish. But also, just before we go, there is going to be a Q&A session, so please do think about your questions.
Hi there. I think I agree with you, but there's two issues here. We're never going to get to permission-based because the web won't work like that. The fabric of permanence is real. That's just the way it is. We will move to that more transparent world as we move away from the command and control. If I don't control it, there's a fear base. And I agree with David, there's a lot of scaremongering going on here. Whilst we have offline laws attempting to police this, it will always be a tension. But equally, Generation Z, the 1993 generation who came into the workforce last year, have a very different view of this. It will take some time for their view to be pushed forward, and it's more likely it is more the view that you're saying. But in 4 years' time, Generation Y, the millennials, will be in charge in the workforce. And their view of it is more your view of it. So what do we do in this interim? And my view is we need to we need to create some new online laws to actually say where people sit in all this. There's an education piece to do, but we have to be able to get through this meantime situation. But then as we lose our command and control world and we very much embrace the transparent web world you're talking about, it will become less of an issue, but it's an issue today.
In the end, like if you think about it, the example with government, sorry, am I talking too much?
No, not at all. It's an extra panel member. Let's go
The
for
example
it.
with the government and Twitter, the government uses data from Twitter to attack a kid that posted something, 2 years ago. That's just not right. That has nothing to do with Twitter.
Yeah.
I agree it has nothing to do with Twitter, but it does have an implication to education of just making people aware of what happens. I mean, just to try and let's do a bit of audience participation here. So if I were to outline a deal to you guys that says, if you give me all your data online, I will ensure you always buy your consumer electronics, goods, etc. at the cheapest price. Would you go for that? Hands up, who would take that deal? Okay. For those of you that didn't put your hand up, any of you use Amazon? PC World, all these guys? This is kind of the deal you've already entered into, actually. Probably unaware of the fact. And that's just an education one, because actually most people, the people who put their hands up, I agree. I go for that deal every day of the week. I'm happy to share that data because I want the cheapest deal, so I'll go for it. But you've got to be aware of it, and that's what it comes down to. And I think a lot of, this is not unusual with any big data debate, we get always drawn into the privacy issues because they are real. They're the things that people worry about. They want the benefits, but they're worried about the downsides. It is just transparency because, plenty of people put their hand up, say they go for that deal.
I think you might be able to read something into that. As it's being proved, there are. Does anyone else have any questions? There are some mega brains here. There we go. Tom Power going for. By the way, is anyone else in that situation where when you say one word over and over again, so almost lose? I'm just about hitting that moment with data right now. We've just been data. It's done very data set. Use it 4 times in the next sentence.
Okay, so my question is for the panel and for you, Sanderson. Do consumers really care or have the right to care about something that they don't pay for? Do they have the right to control data that they don't pay any management fees to control or protect? And shouldn't the companies who provide them with these free services just be able to rip them off as much as they wish?
Interesting choice of words. I think if you put the term "rip them off" into the audience, that would create a negative response inevitably. I think the reality is, I mean, kind of repeating the same thing. I think most of these deals are actually pretty good, and as we just did with the audience there, most people, if offered the deal, would probably go for it. Google, is it a good deal? Absolutely. I mean, it's an incredible infrastructure they've built. It costs them a huge amount of money to run every year, and all they ask in return is some data about what you're searching for and where you go on the net. It's a pretty good deal. I think most people would embrace that. However, as we've seen, as markets mature, consumers do need protection. And we've seen this is what governments do. If there is markets that are maybe benefiting from this lack of information, this disparity between the informed and the uninformed, and that causes problems, then legislators tend to step in. I think we have an opportunity now to avoid that. I think if you see how Google have reacted to the EU push, they have pulled back on some of their practices, and that's probably the right way of dealing with it. But I think it is it fair to lure somebody in with some free services and they're unaware of why it's free and what you're going to do with it? Probably not, actually. And that's why all of these companies have terms of service. I don't know how many people have read the 14,000 words that's the Facebook terms of service. It is a thrilling read. I would recommend it. But, they all have terms of service. It's probably worth reading them. They probably need to make them slightly simpler. I know Google are doing some work on this at the moment. And then you have a better situation because consumers go in with confidence, and the organizations that are using the data can do so in the safe knowledge they're doing so with permission.
I think my answer is very much along the lines of it can be unregulated and the Wild West that it's been until, and we're at that until point, because now we're at the situation where this, we've created more data in the last 2 years than has ever been created with our IT industry. So now that data deluge is here, the problem is much, much bigger, much more widespread. And it's not just individuals that are suffering, it's communities and nations. When we get to that point, this is no longer acceptable, as the European regulators are starting to push on this. And that's the reason it's different today than maybe it was a couple of years ago. One of the things I say to our tech city companies is, if you're going to take a free Google service, which is and start your business up on it. Once you're running your business and it's your platform for your business, you should be paying for it. And so once you've actually got some sort of service contract with some of these companies, then you have rights and rights of reply. But it's the fact that that data deluge over the last 2 years has exacerbated this problem, and the Wild West is just no longer acceptable.
I think my answer is yes. I think I have a right to know what they're doing with my data. I don't have a problem with them using it to design new products, to enrich my life, or to improve the world at large, but I think I do have a right to know. And I think that applies also to governments. I'd like to know everything that they know about me. And I'd like to have that access to that, either through open data, the Open Data Initiative, or just through the right of access. I'm on the one hand, I sort of, I don't lie awake every single night worrying about these kind of things, but I am a computer scientist and I know what can be done, I know the trending, and I know it can be wrong conclusions can be arrived at, through misanalysis or just getting a spreadsheet wrong. I mean, there's plenty of examples about, miscalculations on spreadsheets. The same kind of applies, just on a bigger scale. I think fundamentally that, I'm happy with the deal. I get to use these companies' free services, and they get to find out a little bit about me. By and large, that's a deal that works. But I would like to know what it is that they know. And if they obstruct that, or then I think it threatens the relationship of the deal, in my eyes. So much so that I might even go out and misadvertently buy a lot of coconut oil, see what happens, and just start screwing around with their algorithms.
Yeah, I do have a. Yeah.
It's already happened because until my 3-year-old daughter was born, my iPad was my iPad. It's no longer my iPad, and I think as far as YouTube is concerned, I like a whole new range of stuff that I never liked before, even I didn't know that I liked. So it's like I can see both sides of it. I'm like, it's like nothing's perfect, and they're just abstracting large trends out of masses of volumes. I don't think they've got a file on Will Lovegrove. I really don't. But on the other hand, I'd just like to know on a personal level, but also on a professional level, kind of what they're doing and where they're going next, because these brands and these services do have a large impact on my life.
There you go. Yeah, I think that is time on the data panel where we have heard the word data. If we had a way of tracking that, it would be trending pretty high. But guys, please give a big round of applause for David, Jackie, and Will. They are doing amazing things with. There we go. It's going to do amazing things now in the press area.